You have been in rooms where someone walked in and the room shifted. Not because of what they said, not because of what they wore. Something in the way they existed in the space made others lean forward and follow. Before this ends, one of these 6 rules will name something you have always sensed but never had the language for. The 4th one is the one most people resist because it requires giving up something that feels like honesty. But the ones who understand it stop being surprised by how others treat them. When Niccolò Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, he was not a powerful man. He was a disgraced diplomat writing from exile, having been arrested, tortured on the Strappado, and released to rot on his family farm outside Florence. He had served the Florentine Republic faithfully for 14 years. And when the Medici returned to power, they stripped him of everything in a single afternoon. What most people believe about Machiavelli, that he was a teacher of cruelty, a philosopher of manipulation, the patron saint of the unscrupulous. What Machiavelli actually wrote is more uncomfortable than that he wrote what he had observed. He was not inventing ruthlessness. He was refusing to pretend it wasn't already there. The result is a manual of concentrated observation about how power actually works, not how it should work, but how it does. And embedded in that observation are teachings about respect that no etiquette guide has ever dared state this plainly. Here are 6 ways Machiavelli teaches the commanding of respect without announcement, without performance, without asking for it. The 6th is the one he considered most important of all, and the one that takes longest to build. Way 1. Be feared rather than despised, but never be hated. But he is immediately precise about the limits. Never be hated. Fear that arises from consistent, fair, and predictable behavior builds something durable. Hatred, born of cruelty or contempt, or the violation of what people hold sacred, destroys everything. Way 2. Control appearances because the world judges by what it sees. Machiavelli was ruthlessly honest about a truth that makes many people uncomfortable. Most of what we call judgment is actually perception management. People judge you by appearance, by behavior in public, by the story you tell through your actions, not by your inner life. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This is not an invitation to be fake. It is an instruction to understand that reality and perception are different, and that leadership requires managing both. This is not vanity. It is political literacy. The person who believes that how they appear is irrelevant is the person who is constantly confused about why others respond to them unpredictably. Way 3. Act decisively. Hesitation is its own announcement. Machiavelli observed that the leaders who survived, and more importantly, who thrived, were not necessarily the most intelligent or the most virtuous. They were the ones who moved. The person who hesitates in a crisis, who waits to see how others respond before committing, communicates something that cannot be unsaid. I am not sure. That uncertainty travels faster than any announcement, and it invites others to fill the vacuum. Way 4. Never show weakness, especially about the things that threaten you most. This teaching is frequently misunderstood as an instruction to pretend problems don't exist. Machiavelli meant something more specific. Do not announce your fears, your doubts, or your vulnerabilities to people who can exploit them. He was observing that in any competitive environment, political, organizational, social, there are people who are actively looking for the crack in the wall. The person who tells the wrong confidant about their insecurity, about their position, has handed that confidant a lever. The practical application. When you face a setback, control what you communicate about it. Name what needs to be named, but do not perform distress for an audience. Address the problem. Do not advertise the wound. Way 5. Study human nature as if your survival depends on it. He wrote, "Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. This is not a compliment to humanity, but it is useful information. Understanding human nature, the drives that actually motivate people, which are almost always a combination of fear, desire, self-interest, and the need to preserve self-image, lets you predict behavior more accurately and communicate more effectively. The leader who operates from illusions about human motivation will be perpetually surprised. The leader who has studied what people actually do, not what they say, not what they should do, can build plans that account for real behavior. Way 6. Build reputation through action, not through words. Machiavelli's final instruction on respect is the most straightforward. Do things, build things, complete things. Solve problems that others couldn't solve. He wrote, "There is nothing that consumes so much as do great undertakings." He was not counseling workaholism. He was observing that in a world full of rhetoric, the person who delivers becomes incomparably valuable. Reputation is a kind of compound interest. Each completed action adds to it. Each abandoned promise subtracts from it. Each difficult situation navigated without collapse multiplies it. The person who does this consistently for years accumulates something that cannot be manufactured artificially, a record. The 6 ways predictable standards: controlled appearances, decisive action, composed restraint, studied observation, and demonstrated results are not a formula for manipulation. They are a description of how genuine authority is actually built. Not claimed, not demanded, built. Machiavelli was writing in a world where the consequences of weakness or inattention were imprisonment, exile, or death. The stakes in most of our lives are not that extreme, but the dynamics he described are still operating in every boardroom, classroom, household, and negotiation happening today. He is still being read 500 years later because he was telling the truth, and the truth, even when it is uncomfortable, is the beginning of strategy. If this reached you at the right time, subscribe. We explore the deepest questions of human existence every week so you can live yours more fully.